Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Vikings on SI. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by Joe Nelson. Joe, how are we doing today? Glorious day. Bit of breaking Vikings news that maybe we could discuss a little later on, but plenty to discuss in Vikings land after another big win over the Bears.
I'm good. I'm good. They're just trying to keep pace with the Lions. I mean, 9-2 versus 10-1. I think it's virtually a lock that the Lions are either going to be the 1 or the 5, and then the Vikings are either going to be the 1, the 2, or the 5 or the 6. So there's more places Minnesota could fall in this NFC playoff race. But the way the Lions are going, I just feel like some good comparisons have been like the 1999 Greatest Show on Turf, St. Louis Rams, Kurt Warner, Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, Oz Zahir, Akeem, Marshall Falk, Ricky Prohl. Those guys could go, man. And I think that's a pretty fair comparison. And I can see Detroit winning 15 or 16 games at this point and just kind of running away with that number 1 seed. It's pretty much a miracle that the Vikings have kept it this close to this point in the season with Sam Darnold. But I think eventually Detroit's going to, barring an injury, clinch that number 1. So, kind of forecasting where the Vikings will be in the playoffs, probably the 5 or the 6 seed. I don't think there's any way they slip all the way to 7.
No, it doesn't feel like, especially when you look at their schedule and you look at the schedules of the other teams that are in the hunt, so to speak, that it's going to be hard for them to slip down that far. But you mentioned the playoffs, so let's talk about it. And I know you and I had discussed beforehand kind of ranking these teams. Obviously, ranking the teams in the NFC playoff race right now that are in there right now, from order of the most you'd want to face them to the least you'd want to face them. And I think it's easy to say who we both agree on who we'd least want to face. It's probably
it's Detroit,
Detroit
right?
Lions. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants that. You'd be going to Detroit, which it would be a nightmare.
Unless you can find a way, unless you can keep pace, and maybe they slip up here down the stretch, and that Week 18 game becomes something. But it for sure feels like right now, at least looking at it, that you're going to have to go to Detroit, and that place is going to be Rockets in the playoffs.
Well, I mean, that Week 18 game could be something as long as it's just they're within a game of each other, right? I mean, unless there's a tiebreaker scenario where even if the Vikings split, they already know for a fact that they can't win a tiebreaker over Detroit. So I guess that scenario is possible. But yeah, I mean, if you have to go to Detroit, or even if you have to have Detroit come to your house, I think that's by far the least desirable potential playoff matchup. The good news is that Minnesota does not have to worry about that in the first round. Again, it's possible. You never know. Like Detroit could fall to the 2 seed. Minnesota could end up getting the 7, and then you'd have a first round matchup. But I think that's safe to say it's highly unlikely at this point. But if you're Minnesota, you're probably looking at it like, okay, we're probably the 5 or the 6. If you hold off Green Bay, you're the 5. If you hold off Green Bay and the Commanders or any other team that happens to sneak up towards the back end of that playoff race, and we're talking about the teams in the West and the South, you're probably not going any lower than the 6. But it's pretty wide open, right? Like there's so many potential first round opponents, and the sad thing is because of the NFL structure. If you're the 5 seed, the Vikings might win 13 games, and they're still going to be the 5 seed, and they'd have to go on the road to maybe a 9 or 10 winner of the NFC West or the NFC South. And I was breaking it all down just a little bit ago, trying to put together a story for Vikings on SI. And if you look at the South, it's the Falcons and the Bucks. The Falcons are 6-5. The Bucks are 5-6. The Saints are 4-7. The Panthers are 3-8. But even as good as Bryce Young looked on Sunday against the Chiefs, they're still the Panthers. They're not going to be in the picture at the end of the day. The Saints are 4-7. I can't take them seriously because they lost 7 games in between 2-game winning streaks. I'm not seeing that at all. Hi, honey. What's that? Yeah, come get the crib for your baby. Go ahead. Anyway,
I can cut this out. We can wait.
No, it's funny. I don't care. That's real life. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately, and people want to they want to get the real vibes that people have in their lives. So, welcome to my life, everybody. That's my 3-year-old Penelope, who has a baby doll and her baby doll's crib. as she goes with it, was in the little side room down here. Here, I'll shut the door. Don't worry. Thanks. Love you.
I'm sure my kid who's sleeping upstairs on the floor will start screaming at some point here in the
At
middle
some
of the
point, he's
video.
going to come get you. But where was I? I was talking about the South.
Yeah.
Again, it's really a two-team race right there. If you look at the Athletics playoff odds, this is kind of cool. Can I share my screen in this? I think I can.
Should
Watch
be
this.
able
This
to.
is this is fun. Okay, cool. So the NFL's the Athletics playoff odds. This is fairly cool because it has the Vikings going 12-5, Eagles 13-4, Lions 14-3. So you've got your 1 seed in Detroit, your 2 seed in the Eagles. The Vikings would be the 5, the Packers the 6 at 11-6, and then you got the winner of the South as the
Yeah,
4.
scroll
That
down
would
a bit.
be Atlanta. Yeah, right. 11th best record in the NFL based on these simulations, but they'd be 10-7. They'd be the 4 seed, so that would eliminate the 3 seed. That would eliminate the Vikings Kirk Cousins playoff matchup, and it would set up a showdown with either Arizona, excuse me, or Seattle, who they both have, who the Athletics prediction has going 9-8. But it's so wide open, Jonathan, because right here you see the Rams and 49ers 8-9. That division is, I mean, good luck solving that riddle. It's really
Right.
difficult. So, but all the numbers, all the data right now says the most likely outcome is the Minnesota Vikings is the 5 seed going on the road against the winner of the NFC West. I'd be cool with that because if it's the Cardinals, I would not fear that one bit. I would be a little leery of going to Seattle where it's going to be nuts and the weather could be a problem. I wouldn't want to go to San Francisco because they might get healthy. And the Rams, I'd be fine going there, even though the Vikings lost to them. But that was a game on short rest. I know the Rams are a legitimate team, but I think the Vikings are better at the end of the day. And if they had a full 6 or 7 days to prepare, I think that's a difference maker for sure. Plus, I think the refs would be a little bit better, and they would see what happens to Sam Darnold's face getting ripped off in the end zone, like they missed earlier this year.
You would
I
hope the
don't know.
refs are
I
at
mean,
least a little
if,
better in the
if you had to
playoffs.
pick, yeah, if they'd be hopefully earn the spot in the playoffs. But if you had to pick one team from the West, which one would you want to go to?
When I was looking at it, when I was looking at the standings and the stats and everything, and you look at the teams and how they're playing right now, I think I would rather play Seattle. I know you have to go on the road. They'll get that
Really?
experience coming up later on, but you look at what they're able to what they've done on offense, and it's good. It's okay. I mean, they're 13th in total yards. They're 16th in points scored. Their passing game obviously is better than their running game right now. They're ranked third in passing game, which I mean that could pose some problems against the Vikings cornerbacks for sure. But their running game, they can't run to save their lives. They're 28th in running, so you're going to force Geno Smith to try and beat this Vikings defense. Good luck, man. As resurgent as Geno Smith has had of a career over the past couple years in Seattle, I don't see him playing that well against this Vikings defense that has just made life hell for every other opposing quarterback. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball, the Seahawks and the Falcons, of the teams in the playoffs right now, if the playoffs are supposed to start today in the NFC, of the teams in the NFC right now, they've got the 14th best points allowed, and you look at yards allowed, they're 19th. So their defense isn't really too great either. So I think the Vikings would have a better shot against them or the Cardinals for sure.
Yeah, Arizona's kind of sneaky this Sunday too because they
Yeah.
come to U.S. Bank Stadium. I was writing some stuff on them earlier today for Vikings on SI, and they've allowed one offensive touchdown in the last 12 quarters,
Ooh, yeah.
right? But they played the Bears and the Jets in back-to-back games, and there were no offensive touchdowns allowed. So I can't. And then they just played Seattle, and Seattle only scored one.
And I
And
think when you look at like the quarterbacks that you would play in either of those games, I'd rather go up against Geno Smith than go up against Kyler Murray, who has that dual threat capability that's better than just about any other quarterback outside of Lamar Jackson.
yeah, I think that's a really strong point too. But when it comes to strength of schedule, as you can see here, San Francisco's. I mean, that's a terribly tough schedule. We
Yeah.
know they're good, but I
Are they
think,
going to miss the playoffs?
dude, they
That would be
might. I mean, they
that would
have
be
so many
impressive. That'd be
injuries.
insane.
Brock Purdy's not healthy. Like, if Daniel Jones goes there, you might get a Vikings Daniel Jones rematch if it ends up being the 49ers from the West in the playoffs. But I think that's pretty unlikely. I mean, you look at that schedule, the strength of schedule remaining 591 opponents combined winning percentage. That's insane. Detroit's a loss. Buffalo's a loss. Every other game is a wash. And then Miami, they're kind of dragging things down with a 5-6 record, but they've been lights out since Tua came back. So Miami's a scary team now in the AFC East. That's not going to be easy for San Francisco to beat. I don't know where that game is. I don't know if it's in San Francisco or Miami, but either way, I think it's really about Seattle, the Rams, and Arizona at this point. But
Yeah, absolutely. That game is in Miami, by the way.
okay, yeah, that's tough. They have to go across the country to Miami. But if you look at the NFC South strength of schedule, I mean, Atlanta doesn't have it easy. Tampa, the Athletic has them going 9-8 and finishing one game behind Atlanta. But look at their schedule, man. Raiders win, 2 against the Panthers. Both could be
Should be
wins. The
wins.
Cowboys suck. That's a win.
That should be a
The
win.
Saints suck. That's a win. I know these games are always crazy in the South. Anytime these teams get together, it's wild, right? But Tampa Bay could easily take all 5 of these games that qualify under the easiest column, and all of a sudden they're a 10-win team. And then it's just the Chargers is the one lone really tough game that they have left on that schedule. So if I had to pick right now based on who they have left to play, I'm taking the Bucks to win that division.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably a double-digit win team at 5-6 with 6 to go. I think they can go 5-1 in that stretch. I mean, at worst, they're 9-8. So I don't know. There's probably 6 or 7 teams: Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and then all 4 in the West who are legitimate potential road trips for the Vikings in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at that schedule. You look at that schedule for Tampa. That's a team that should be almost favored. I know they're trailing Atlanta right now in the NFC South, but that team should, with the schedule they have in front of them, that team should be favored to absolutely take home that division. When you look at the rest of the teams, Joe, in the NFC playoff race right now, I don't know if you want to include the in the hunt teams like we've been doing with the Bucks and 49ers and Rams and Cardinals, but when you look at them, we already chose Detroit as the team you least want to face. For me, when you keep going up that or keep going down that chart, I think the way Philadelphia is playing right now, they've got to be right up there with, maybe for me, the Commanders as the second team that you'd least want to face right now.
Philadelphia, I don't want anything to do with them.
They
Saquon
can't
is
pass. They can't pass,
well.
but
That's the
so
thing. I think they
they
can.
have to rely on Saquon Barkley a lot.
That's the thing, though. Saquon's having an Adrian Peterson 2012 like season. In fact, he's about ready to. I mean, he's not about ready to, but he's on pace to break the NFL single season rushing record.
Yeah, but the Vikings
Even
have the
though he
best
has one
rush
extra
defense.
game. By the way, Adrian in 2012 had 2,097 yards. If you paced out Saquon Barkley on a 16-game schedule like Adrian had, he's on pace for 2,025 or so yards. So
Wow.
Adrian's rushing season, forget about the receiving that Saquon brings
Mm-hmm.
to the table, and Adrian had 40 catches that year. His rushing season is actually more impressive in 2012 than what Saquon is doing
Oh yeah.
this year, based on a 16-game schedule.
Well,
Not by
also
much, though.
based on like the rest of the offense they had surrounding them too. Saquon at least has wide receivers and a quarterback who can pass, whereas Christian Ponder as your quarterback, who's the wide
That's
receivers
it.
that year?
Great point. Yeah, exactly. It was Adrian against the world,
Yeah,
So that was a different story. But yeah, I mean, Philadelphia would be a really tough opponent, and I don't think the
because you'd
Vikings
have
are
to
going
go to Philadelphia.
Philly's likely the 2 seed, right? As long as Detroit doesn't give up the grip on 1, Philly's the 2 seed. So as long as you don't slip to 7, if you're Minnesota, you don't have to worry about Philly in the first round. Where it gets really interesting, though, is the second round. The divisional round
Mm-hmm.
is going to be really interesting. If you look at the NFC, look at this, man. Look at this bracket. You've got the 5 seed Minnesota, you got the 6 seed Green Bay, and the 7 seed Washington. That very well, whatever order they're in, those are probably going to be the bottom 3 teams in the NFC seeding.
Yeah,
So all 3 of those teams could win on Wild Card Weekend. Washington would be capable of beating Philadelphia. Washington, if they got matched up with Seattle or whoever it is in the South or the West, whatever the shakeout is for the 3 and 4 seeds, they're very good. They could beat any one of those teams. Green Bay, same thing. Minnesota, same thing. So that's why it's critical that Minnesota is the 5 seed, because if you're the 5 and you advance to the second round, the lowest remaining seed has to go to Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And think about it, Jonathan. If all three of the low seeds win, Minnesota would host the divisional round game.
Yeah.
That would be monstrous. Think
Stay away
about
from
that.
Detroit as long as you can. Obviously,
Yes, a
if you have to
second
save
round
that
game.
for, yeah,
You could host Green Bay. You could host Green Bay in the second round if Washington was the 7th seed and took down Philadelphia and had to go to Detroit in the divisional round. Can you imagine that? A second round game at US Bank Stadium, Vikings Packers. I
oh yeah,
mean, the
it
NFC
is.
North's the best division in football. It's meant to be.
Yeah, it just looks crazy when you look at this playoff bracket. And I know this is a conversation that's been had plenty of times, so we don't need to delve too far into it. But when you look at the standings of the teams that are going to be the away teams and the teams that are going to host, it's ridiculous that
Yeah,
Atlanta and Seattle are going to be hosting wildcard games against teams against a Minnesota or a Green Bay team that could be 2 losses on the entire season if everything goes their way for the rest of
right.
the year, 2, 3 losses. That just doesn't make sense. Those teams should be absolutely hosting. I don't care if you win a division. It shouldn't mean that much that you get to host a playoff game and change, the outcome of, or potentially change the outcome of playoffs just because you won your division. Congratulations, but I think the
Yeah,
better record should always host no matter what, whether they won or not. But yeah, when you look at that schedule, when you look at that playoff bracket, I wouldn't want to be any of those teams trying to host the Washingtons, the Green Bays, or the Minnesotas of the world because they're so dang good and how they
no.
and what they've been able to do this season, especially Washington. I think
It,
with how their quarterback is playing right now, they could go on a bit of a run because he's elevated everybody in that Washington offense.
yeah, no, he's extreme dual threat and he's aggressive and they've got playmakers all over the field too. And the one thing about Minnesota that makes them scary as a road team is that I think they 6-0 on the road this season
Yeah,
or 6 and
that's
0 in
outdoor
in
stadiums.
outdoor stadiums. So yeah, that's 6-0 on the road. I mean, those are all road
Yeah,
games. The Vikings don't play outdoors. So 6-0 in outdoor stadiums, one of them being in London. So they're dangerous, man. This is not the Vikings of the past. And as long as Sam Darnold doesn't turn the ball over, they have a legit shot to beat anybody, and they proved it against Detroit earlier this season. I wish the NFL would just do what the NBA is thinking about doing. And I like the conferences in the NFL. Don't get me
hmm
wrong. I like the AFC versus the NFC. But like you said, it should be the top seven teams by record seeded that way. You can raise a banner for a division championship all you want and have that little celebration, kind of like the NBA Cup, right? Like it's
hmm
nice. You can raise the banner. It's cool, but it means nothing in terms of playoff seeding. That's what the NFL should do. The NBA is talking about getting rid of conferences altogether and just
I
going
think
the
you
top
should
16 seeds. The top 16 teams in the NBA make the playoffs. That's a far better product when it's
because
so
how
lopsided.
often when you
It
look at it,
happens
how
every year,
often
Jonathan.
yeah, how
Every
often is
year.
it are you really getting the absolute best matchup in the Super Bowl because you're whittling it down between the best of one conference versus the best of the other? You're telling me you wouldn't want a Kansas City Buffalo Super Bowl with how those two teams have played each other the past 6 years? That'd be
Oh,
an
that'd be
incredible
phenomenal.
Super Bowl. Yeah.
Well, so if you had Kansas City and you got matched up with Detroit in the second round or something like that, that'd be phenomenal as well. You
Oh yeah.
take Buffalo or Pittsburgh against a Pittsburgh Green Bay, something like that. That'd be a thrilling matchup. But I mean, even in the NFC just alone, nobody wants to watch these garbage teams
hmm
from the NFC West or the NFC South, and it's just bad. It's bad if a team that wins 8 or 9 or even 10 games for some of these teams, they're not that good. They
Yeah.
get in over teams that are winning more. Um, I don't know how they do it. They're never going to change it, but
It'd be
I
awesome if
wish
they
they
did.
would because the Vikings should not be on the road in the opening round of the playoffs. They deserve a home game. They're going to win 13 games, maybe more. I don't know. They could win 14 games. 5-1 in their last 6, and they win 14 games. It's very possible. So it is what it is. But the good news is they're in a pretty good position. And if you're the 5 seed, you do get to play somebody from the West or the South, which is
Yeah.
probably a bonus this year.
Who, when you're looking at it, since we continue to have this conversation, who do you want the Vikings? If you're the Vikings and you're going to the playoffs, who do you want the most? Who's the team
Kirk.
when you're looking at it? You want Kirk?
I think that's the smartest one. I don't want Baker Mayfield. If you're the Vikings, you have to go to Tampa Bay. Baker's tough, man. The Bucks are tough. Antoine Winfield Jr. Who knows how healthy they are? Maybe Mike Evans is back later in the season. I don't want anything to do with that. I want nothing to do with the Tampa Bay
Yeah.
Buccaneers. They kind of scare me, right? Like they beat Detroit. They're the only
Mhm.
team that's beaten Detroit, and when they're going on all cylinders, they're tough to beat. And Baker's a gamer, and we saw what he did to the Vikings in the season opener last year, and that was in Minneapolis. I want
Mhm.
nothing to do with that. I wouldn't be scared of Kyler Murray. I wouldn't be scared of Geno Smith. I'd be scared of going to Seattle. I think that'd be a little bit of a fiery matchup. That one should strike fear into everybody.
You
I
get
would be
practice
afraid of San
at
Francisco.
you get practice with going to Seattle though at least, so you'll know
Yeah,
what
they've been
you're
there
you're
many
up against.
times.
Well, they're
But
going there
man,
later
I
this
don't
season, aren't
want.
they?
You got to think about it though. Like Sam Darnold in that noise. Oh my God, that could be a catastrophe.
We get to
And
see
then
that
if
week
Darnold,
16.
well, we're gonna see it, and that game's gonna matter too because the
Yeah.
Seahawks are gonna be gunning for the playoffs.
Yeah, that's what I mean by you're going to get practice at it. You're going to know what that playoff experience is going to be like
That's
because
true.
it's a
That's
week
true.
16 game. It'll be what? The playoffs will be if you
3 weeks later.
have to go back to Seattle, it's 3 weeks later. It's not like
That's a
going
good
to
point.
you're going to have the experience of going there.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point.
That could mean the whole
I
world in that playoff
reserve
game
the
cuz
right change my opinion on in after Christmas whenever that game takes place. Um, but yeah, Kirk makes the most sense to me because it's in a dome stadium. You'd be going to Atlanta, and I think Kirk is extremely vulnerable against a really good pass rush, and the Vikings have that.
Yeah. Now, Ivan Pace Jr.'s injury will certainly change things. Hopefully, it's just a short term, but we saw what the absence of Blake Cashman meant to this defense in just 2 weeks when they lost to the Rams and they lost to the Lions, and those teams just diced them up in short yardage scenarios. Obviously, they play the inside linebacker position a little bit differently, but it's certainly going to affect the Vikings defense with how Ivan Pace rushes the passer from his interior linebacker position. It's going to be a big loss, Joe, not having Ivan Pace for at least the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, and you wrote about Jamin Davis. How do you? I don't even know how you pronounce his name. Jamin
I think
Davis, the
so.
former first round pick. I was kind of shocked because I saw the Vikings had signed him, and I'm like, huh, how long has he been out of the league? And I swear he's relatively fresh. And I looked him up, and I'm like, oh my God, he's the 19th overall pick like 4 years ago,
Yeah,
and he's unemployed until today. So
he's on
what
the
exactly
Packers
has happened
practice
with
squad.
him? And I don't even know if he's a viable candidate to play, or if he's just an extra body to come in and take a shot at.
Yeah, he was playing earlier this season with Washington before they cut him in early October, and he's been on the Packers practice squad. But as Will Raggets kind of put in the Slack chat, this is a typical Quasi move. He loves his former first round busts. Just take a shot at him and see what happens. See if you can get something out of really nothing that everybody else has kind of just let go and expects to fail. And this screams of a Quasi move. I don't like you said. I don't think it's gonna come out, and I don't think he's gonna really amount to much because you're gonna have to pick up a really difficult role in this Vikings defense that we know is incredibly complicated, incredibly difficult to try and like pick up. And if you've already struggled in your NFL career, you're already most likely lacking confidence with how this season's gone for you. That's going to be a tough thing to ask a guy to do on short notice, especially this weekend, but over the next couple weeks. This is going to be a big game changing loss for the Vikings and their defense. I don't imagine he's going to get a whole lot of playing time. I think it's Camo Grugier Hill that's going to the most of the snaps on defense in place of Ivan Pace while he's out.
Yeah, and Grugier Hill had interceptions in back-to-back games in weeks 3 and 4 against C.J. Stroud and Jordan Love. So he's been there, he's done that. He filled in when he needed to earlier in the season, and I would imagine that he's up to the task. And the other good thing about Minnesota's defense is that they have so many hybrid safeties like Josh Metellus and Harrison Smith, who can actually slide down into the box and play some linebacker when needed. To do exactly what Ivan Pace did and to tackle at that level, that's going to be tough to replace. But this defense has enough pieces where if there was a guy who could go down and you could replace him, it's probably Ivan Pace Jr. You don't want to have any of those other big guns on the outside like a Stephon Gilmore or Shaq Griffin get injured because the depth behind the players there is a little bit more suspect. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be too concerned about pace. And if he's on IR, that means guaranteed 4 games. We know how hamstrings work, though. I think the announcers on Fox, when he hurt his hamstring on Sunday against the Bears, mentioned that they could see his hamstring quiver, which is a horrifying way to explain something tearing, because that's what a hamstring tear or strain is. It's a tear of the muscle. It just depends on how severe it is, but those things don't come back fast from them. So I would actually be shocked if Ivan Pace Jr. was back before the end of the regular season. Whether he's back for the playoffs or not, that's the big question. It would be significant in a playoff atmosphere to not have him out there. And now, as we all know, your margin for error is less. Your margin for
Mm-hmm.
injury that you can overcome is less. You can't lose more guys in the middle of the defense, or you really start to suffer, and that's when big time problems arise.
Yeah, and we've seen the impact of injuries on this team. We saw it last year at the quarterback position. Speaking of which, I know that's a hot topic
That's your
of
boy,
late. Huh?
DJ.
Daniel
Your
Jones
boy.
wrote about him last week over on Vikings on SI, and how this feels like it could be a good fit for him. I don't know about the Vikings, and that's obviously the bigger conversation here is how this fits for the Vikings. It's been talked about. It's been reported on that the Vikings have interest in him potentially, and he clearly has interest in coming here on a veteran minimum or practice squad deal, what have it, after being released by the New York Giants last week. I think obviously it makes sense for him because it's a good landing spot for any quarterback. It feels like every quarterback in the league wants to play for Kevin O'Connell with how he's able to kind of nurture their careers and revitalize it like he did with Sam Darnold. And you saw what he did last year with Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall for a little bit. Clearly, Kevin O'Connell knows how to get play out of his quarterbacks, and this feels like a good landing spot for Daniel Jones. But if you're the Vikings, how does this really fit right now for them? Because Sam Darnold's obviously playing well. I think when you look at it, you'd rather have Nick Mullins as your backup because he knows this offense so well, and we've seen what it looks like when a quarterback doesn't really know how to operate this offense. We saw that last year. So I think right now you sign him, but he's going to be third string or practice squad guy for the rest of the season while he picks up this offense.
I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right. The only reason you would rush Daniel Jones into the fire would be as the backup quarterback if
Yeah.
Sam Darnold got hurt. He's not going to come in and start right
Mm-hmm.
away. Let's say Daniel Jones signs today or tomorrow with the Vikings. Sam Darnold gets injured in practice and he's ruled out for the season. Nick Mullins would be lifted into the starter role, and
Yep.
Jones would be the backup in that scenario. And that's as close as he's probably going to get to playing until the Vikings feel like the pressure to insert him into the lineup because Mullins is either struggling so bad or Mullins gets hurt. That would be the only way. But if you sign him now, you do have 6, almost 7 full weeks to get him up to speed as much as possible to be ready in the event that Sam Darnold
Yeah.
gets banged up or melts down and goes Jets Darnold on the bit and he needs to be taken out of a game. But at this point, we're 11 weeks into this thing. If Darnold has a performance like he had against Jacksonville, where he's throwing interceptions in the red zone left and right, if that's a playoff game, you have to pull him. And
Yeah.
if Daniel Jones has 6 weeks of knowledge under his belt, and he's practiced with these first teamers, that would make more sense because the ceiling is higher. And if Darnold gets hurt, let's be honest. I mean, this season is crap. So anything you do in the playoffs, it's just a blessing at that point because you're like, okay, we know we're dead. We know we're not going to win the Super Bowl. This is your mindset if you're the Vikings.
Yeah.
Let's see what Daniel Jones can do. Let's give a little fire here because he's the dual threat guy. He can actually run. I think he's rushed for almost 275 yards this season.
Mm-hmm.
So he would give you a better chance to win just from a playmaker standpoint. But
Yeah. I think
here's
it's
the other thing, man.
yeah.
I think if you sign Daniel Jones, whether you have intentions of playing him or not, I think it actually adds unnecessary pressure to Darnold because you've got a
Really.
former number 6 overall pick from that
Yeah, but
same mega New
Darnold's
York
the
market,
third
and they're going
overall
to
pick.
yeah, third overall pick and then a 6th overall pick. This is a problem, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a potential problem. Because Darnold, who's never been in this situation before where he's been asked to lead a playoff team,
Yeah.
late in the season, December football, January football, and all of a sudden you've got this guy from New York who has the mega spotlight on him. Everybody's talking about him as well. Oh, there's a present for me. It was my birthday yesterday.
Oh, happy
Okay, I'll
birthday.
be upstairs in a little bit. There's so much pressure that comes with Jones being the backup quarterback, or even just on the practice squad,
Yeah.
that Darnold would have to block that out. I don't
I
like
think if
that for him. I don't want that for him. I want him to have a clear mind, a clear conscience, so that he can go into the December and January football games knowing that, hey, no matter what, this is my gig. No matter what, I don't care what the coaching staff in the front office is telling him. They could be telling him that. But the outside world, that's noise he's not going to be able to block out entirely.
I don't think there would be too much of that noise, though, would there? It
I
doesn't
think
feel
so.
like this is one of those everybody kind of understands. He's not coming in to be the starter or take over Sam Darnold's role because we already know Sam Darnold's kind of locked himself into not kind of he has absolutely locked himself into that role for the rest of the season with how well he's played. He's clearly played and revitalized his career to the point where there's a ton of talk of what's going to happen in the future with him, and the Vikings' future is a conversation for a different day because they're 9-2. There's no reason to look too far into the future with them. It's all about this season. But right now, I think for if the Vikings do bring him in, I think everybody should at least understand this is for next year as a backup, just in case potentially things don't work out injury wise and recovery wise for JJ McCarthy, because he's clearly the future. Kevin O'Connell said it earlier this season in the preseason that what he saw from JJ McCarthy screams to him this is going to be the guy for the future. Now, how that plays out with Sam Darnold, what he does now, can certainly change things. But I think Daniel Jones would be a signing for maybe you're the backup next season. We help you a la Sam Darnold in San Francisco. You get another season under your belt under good coaching. You get to kind of revitalize your career, and then you go on somewhere else, take a flyer deal there. But I don't think for me, I don't think it adds any pressure to Sam Darnold because everybody knows Kevin O'Connell's not going to switch to Daniel Jones just because he brought him in. I think this is Sam Darnold's job, and it will always be his job until the season's done.
I agree with that, and all of that can be said internally at TCO Performance Center. Kevin O'Connell can tell Sam Darnold that. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah can tell Sam Darnold that. Stop hitting me with your wand. And that can happen, right? But the fact of the matter is that if you're in Seattle in Week 16, hey, stop hitting me. And it's my 3-year-old abusing me. If you're in Seattle in Week 16 and Darnold throws 3 picks, stop it. That hurts. It's going to be a problem because everybody in the world's going to be saying, what about Daniel Jones? You brought him in here. He's been here this long. And Darnold's going to hear that. That's unnecessary pressure where he's no longer the guy in everyone's eyes. He is the guy no matter what in everyone's eyes as long as Nick Mullins is the backup because Nick Mullins is safe. He's a safe QB. He's a safe backup quarterback. He's not filled with speculation about what he can do for this franchise. Jones would change that narrative significantly.
I think if we reach the point where Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones is being talked about as, hey, we need to hand it off to him because things are going bad, then obviously that's a point where things clearly have fallen off and really have never gotten back on track. Right now, I don't see that happening with the way Sam Darnold has kind of rebounded from that bad Jacksonville game that they found a way to eke out a win in. I just don't see that happening, so I think you're right that it could lead to some problems in the future, but for right now, the way I see it, at least, I don't see it happening, and I don't see the train going that far off the tracks where we're getting to that point where the outside world's screaming, oh man, we need to switch to Sam Darnold we need to switch to Daniel Jones because this has just looked awful. Sam Darnold, I think, has earned the ability to have, or earned the right to have some trust put into him with how he's played this season.
He's earned it. He won't get it, though. I can guarantee you that.
That's fair.
If Daniel Jones is here, he will not get that.
That's fair. All right. Since your kid's attacking you, you've got a present to get upstairs to. I don't want to hold you off on that much longer. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
And so we'll let you get to your birthday present. We'll let you get to playing wands and wizards and stuff and whatever you're going to play with your daughter there as she's attacking you.
I think you're more likely to play that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, my kid's sleeping, though, so...
Yeah.
He's sleeping, and I'm going to keep him that way because
I
want to get this video edited. So. I want to get this video edited before he wakes up. All right, Joe, good talking to you. We'll talk to you tomorrow right back here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. Do hit subscribe. It does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here on the channel. We'll talk to you tomorrow.